Hey there guys, welcome to another video. So in this video I will be replacing a couple of parts on my HTC One M8. So recently I got this phone off of eBay, and it is a Windows Phone version, and as you can see here it does say Windows Phone there. Now unfortunately the charging port is not really good, and you kind of have to keep it at an angle, or try to hold it as best possible to get it to charge, so that definitely needs to be replaced. And the battery seemed to go down quite a bit, so even though it was at about 70%, it just went down to like 14%, and then it died, and it kind of went into a reboot loop, and I haven't been able to get it to charge again. So what I'm going to go ahead and do today is replace the charging dock, replace the battery, and then replace the two speaker grill covers, because once these come off they won't be able to go back on. This one also seems to have some glue on it, so definitely want to get that off here. So we'll go ahead and begin to remove these here, and then we'll get into the repair. Alrighty, so now we have a couple of screws we need to remove. So we do have two Phillips screws up here, and then we have Torx screws here. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 screws right there. Actually, I don't believe that is a screw, but we'll go ahead and remove these now. So now what we need to do is lift up the actual display so that we can remove the back piece of the housing. So I did cut out a piece here because I realized a little late that the SD card and the SIM card trays were both still in the phone, so I was having a lot of trouble getting the housing off of the phone. But once I did that, it was a lot easier to get out. And what you'll now see here is the motherboard of the phone, and it does have a lot of tape as well as some heat shield on the back of it, and it does get quite hot. But the little stickers that are covering it are basically covering ribbon cables, a bunch of ribbon cables, and they're very finicky, as I found out later. So if you are doing one of these repairs, definitely be careful with this tape, because these ribbon cables are very fragile, and they are very delicate. As well as when you put them back in, make sure that they are seated properly when you do put them back in, because if not, then certain things will not work. So one of the crazier things that happened during this repair was the charge port itself actually broke off when I got to it. So I'm taking the phone apart here and trying to remove the main board, and the charge connector is right underneath it, and it also has the headphone jack. The micro USB metal piece that's soldered to that actual board broke off, which was just crazy to me. But that's why the previous owner said that you had to wiggle it and try to get it in a certain spot to get it to work. That thing had given up. It was done. So definitely needed a replacement, and it works just great now. So while I will say I do like the design of this phone, and of course it is the same or similar on the One M7 and the One M9, and I believe there was a One M10, it is an odd design overall, because one of the things that's very odd is to replace the battery, you have to remove the logic board, and then the battery is on top of the LCD. So if you make a mistake and hit the LCD when you're trying to remove the battery, it can cause some issues. So that's definitely one thing to be careful of when you're trying to change the battery in one of these phones. Just be very careful that you don't mess up the LCD itself. Another odd thing I noticed was while putting the little connections back for the Wi-Fi and for the cellular, I did notice that the dock connector that I got to replace the one that was broken was missing one of the connections for, I guess, Wi-Fi or cellular, and it may be because there were 3 different variants of this phone. So there was the HTC One M8, which was the traditional Android version that was on every carrier. You then had the Windows Phone version, which I have right here, and then you also had a Google Play edition, which was just a Google stock edition of the phone. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So there may be some slight differences in parts between the phones. So that may be something you need to pay attention to if you do repair one of these. So as you can see here, I'm having a little bit of trouble getting the phone back together. The top button was kind of finicky, and I was also having trouble kind of getting the parts to clip in to the housing. So it's a little bit difficult, but once I got it, it was fine. It just has to fit in there snugly, and you have to be able to put those screws back in. So. And one thing I'm also doing here is testing the phone, turning it on to make sure that everything works. One thing I did have an issue with, and I don't have video of, is the camera. I had issues with it not working. And basically I took it back out, I checked the connections, and I got the camera working, but then the front camera didn't work. So I checked that connection, reconnected it, and it still didn't work, but the back camera did work. I then put it back in the housing, and the camera decided to stop working. So that was one of those ribbon cables that I was talking about. They're very finicky, and you have to make sure that they're in there. Now, because I took that tape off previously, that tape was kind of messed up, and I couldn't really put the tape back as well as it was put in the first place. So I ended up using some electric tape just to put over that one cable so that it would actually sit and stay there. And now what you'll see me doing here is just removing the adhesive that's left over from the previous speaker grills. And let me just say that those speaker grills were kind of gross. They had a lot of crust and stuff in them, so it was definitely a good thing to replace them. So here it is, the HTC One M8, completely done here. So I did get everything screwed back in, and I put the new speaker grills on, and the top one went on fine. The bottom one, however, has a kind of lump in it, and I'm not sure why. I may take it apart again, but at this point I'm pretty much kind of over dealing with it. The other issue with it is the camera. So I may have mentioned that earlier, but when you go into camera here, I do have the back camera, but I don't have the front camera. So whenever I put on the front camera, it crashes. So you'll see that in just a second. And it just crashes. Another thing that was kind of weird is the HTC camera. It also just crashes. It doesn't even load. Yeah, there it goes. So it'll just crash. Other than that, everything else works fine. So Wi-Fi, all that good stuff. The new charge port works just fine. The battery is holding a charge really well. So I haven't had any other issues with it. However, one thing that I did try, because I thought maybe it was the software that was the issue with the camera, because this was running Windows 10, and this didn't officially support it, so I downgraded it to Windows 8.1, and that didn't fix the issue. So it definitely wasn't software, but anyway, it's on its original firmware, so it's got everything that it's supposed to have. So for the most part, I'm happy with it, but just a very odd repair. And anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to leave me a like if you like the video, and if you want to see more, please feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.